Today, KFC attracts crowds with its seasoned chicken and secret recipes. But what if I told you that 40,000 years ago, our ancestors were doing something incredibly similar? Without technology, packaging, or menus, they hunted giant birds with courage and seasoned the meat with wild herbs, some healing, others lethal. Around the campfire, tribes gathered not just to keep warm, but to celebrate life in feasts that united clans, sealed alliances, and gave birth to culinary culture. It was a ritual of risk and creativity, where every meal was a vital experiment. Without timers or recipe books, they cooked with instinct, memory, and observation, unknowingly inventing humanity's first fast food. The big question is, how did a simple meal become a symbol of survival, unity, and transcendence in the history of our species? The terror birds, history's most dangerous menu. To truly understand Paleolithic KFC, we need to get intimately acquainted with the menu, a bill of fare that would make any modern chef tremble with both fear and admiration. While today we eat our domesticated, docile, and harmless chicken, raised in controlled environments and slaughtered by industrial machines, our ancestors faced true feathered monsters that dominated entire ecosystems. If modern KFC offers standardized pieces of chicken, perfectly cut thighs, drumsticks, breasts, and wings, our ancestors dealt with birds that looked more like wingless dragons, creatures from evolutionary nightmares that chased horse-sized mammals across primeval forests. In Europe 45,000 years ago, when the first Homo sapiens migrated through icy landscapes, temperate forests were dominated by birds like the Gastornis, giants up to 6.5 feet, 2 meters tall, weighing between 385 and 440 pounds, 175-200 kilos, with concave beaks capable of crushing mammoth bones like crackers. Their fossilized skulls, discovered in sites like Messel in Germany, reveal bone structures reinforced to withstand the impact of devastating blows. Crossing the primitive oceans to prehistoric Australia, an isolated continent where evolution created magnificent oddities, the first Aboriginal peoples encountered the Genyornis newtoni, a 500-pound, 230-kilo bird that ran at 30 midioranmat, 50 km/h, across arid plains. Its legs, fossilized in perfect preservation at Lake Callabonna, show muscles inserted into bones that could generate enough force to knock down medium-sized trees. In North America, terror came in the form of the Titanis walleri, a 8-foot, 2.5-meter raptor bird that chased giant sloths across the prairies. Its fossils, discovered in the Bone Valley Formation in Florida, reveal 6-inch, 15-centimeter claws, larger than those of any known terrestrial predator. Imagine the courage or desperation required to face these creatures armed only with fire-hardened wooden spears, flint tips sharpened with hours of patience, and ropes braided from plant fibers. It wasn't just a hunt, it was a ritual of initiation where failure meant certain death, not only for the hunter, but possibly for his entire family during months of scarcity. This was vastly different from the aseptic safety of a modern industrial kitchen, where 4-pound, 2-kilo chickens are processed by machines on assembly lines, protected by rigid sanitary protocols. Archaeological evidence at the Cuddy Springs site in Australia, a location that has preserved 30,000 years of continuous human occupation, shows carbonized bones of these giant birds deposited alongside human tools in perfectly dated stratigraphic layers. The cut marks, analyzed by electron microscopes, reveal something extraordinary. Our ancestors not only killed these creatures with desperate attacks, but they had mastered the art of dismembering and preparing them with surgical technique. Dr. Judith Field from the University of Sydney discovered that the bones were cut in specific sequences. First the separation of the main joints, then the systematic removal of the meat following muscle groups, and finally the breaking of the long bones for the extraction of the fat-rich marrow. Humanity's first executive chefs operated with a precision that rivaled modern butchers. The most impressive part, isotopic analyses of the bones, reveal that these birds were consumed not only during periods of scarcity, but on a regular basis, as a fundamental part of the diet. This means that our ancestors developed successful hunting strategies against the most dangerous predators of their time, a feat that challenges our perception of the savagery of primitive times. The culinary pharmacy of the Stone Age, herbs that seasoned, cured, and killed. This is where the story becomes truly fascinating and dangerous. If KFC's secret recipe defines the brand's flavor with its famous 11 herbs and spices, a formula kept under lock and key and known by only a handful of executives worldwide, our ancestors also had their own magical blend of seasonings. The crucial difference: the price of a dosage error was an agonizing death in a matter of hours. Primitive functional food, the first nutraceuticals, revolutionary analyses of coprolites, fossilized feces, conducted at sites like Shanidar in Iraq, where Dr. Ralph Solecki discovered the famous Neanderthal burials with flowers, reveal something that rewrote our understanding of the Paleolithic diet. Using mass spectrometry and gas chromatography, researchers identified that our Neanderthal ancestors regularly consumed more than 20 different species of plants, many with potent medicinal and psychoactive properties. Achillea millefolium, yarrow, a plant containing more than 85 different bioactive compounds, including anti-inflammatory flavonoids and antimicrobial essential oils. Chemical analyses show that when combined with animal fat at high temperatures, this plant releases compounds that not only improve the meat's flavor, but also prolong its preservation for weeks. Ephedra, known today as the source of ephedrine, a powerful stimulant compound. Our ancestors discovered that small amounts of this plant, chewed during long hunts, increased physical endurance and kept hunters alert for days. But excessive doses caused fatal heart arrhythmias, a deadly balance that required precise knowledge passed down through generations. Hyoscyamus niger, black henbane, contains tropane alkaloids like scopolamine and atropine. In microscopic doses, this plant relieved muscle pain after strenuous hunts and induced deep restorative sleep. In slightly larger doses, it caused hallucinations that were interpreted as spiritual visions. In even larger doses, it caused respiratory paralysis and death. They didn't just season for flavor. They were creating humanity's first medicinal foods, primitive nutraceuticals that combined nutrition, medicine, and spirituality in a single meal. Every banquet was simultaneously a dinner, a pharmacy, and a religious ritual. Primitive shamanism and sacred cooking, the first pharmaceutical chefs. Just as a KFC branch in a busy neighborhood brings people from different backgrounds together around a table for pleasure and social convenience, tribal fires were also gathering points for power and cultural identity. But with a crucial difference that challenges our modern understanding, every meal was a potentially fatal pharmacological experiment led by specialists who combined knowledge of botany, chemistry, and spirituality. Dr. Karen Hardy, from the Catalan Institute of Human Paleoecology, used pioneering techniques to analyze plant micro-remains on 50,000-year-old Neanderthal teeth, discovering something both disturbing and fascinating. Our evolutionary cousins regularly chewed highly poisonous plants like Taxus baccata, yew, and Atropa belladonna, deadly nightshade, vegetables that contain compounds capable of stopping the human heart in minutes. The yew contains taxine, an alkaloid that in minimal doses acts as a cardiotonic, strengthens the heart, but in slightly larger doses causes instant cardiac arrest. The belladonna produces atropine, which dilates pupils and induces mystical visions in small quantities, but causes fatal seizures if the dose is exceeded by a few milligrams. Danger, dosage, and ancestral wisdom, the gastronomic Russian roulette. Why did our ancestors risk their lives with deadly plants when they had access to hundreds of harmless plant species? The answer lies in the hazy border between primitive medicine, shamanic spirituality, and the need to survive in hostile environments. Small controlled doses of these poisonous plants could relieve chronic pain from hunting injuries, fight infections that were often fatal, and induce altered states of consciousness interpreted as communication with ancestral spirits. But calculating the exact dosage was a literal matter of life and death, requiring pharmacological knowledge that rivaled modern medicine. Dr. Richard Wrangham from Harvard, author of Catching Fire: How Cooking Made Us Human, argues that this risky botanical experimentation was crucial for our brain's evolution. Every new combination of herbs was a primitive scientific experiment. Some results brought a miraculous cure, others induced revealing hallucinations, and some were fatally toxic. The survivors of this culinary Russian roulette developed complex systems of knowledge that were passed down through initiation rituals, mnemonic songs, and practical demonstrations. They created humanity's first universities, centers of learning where being wrong meant death, but being right meant having power over life, death, and the supernatural. Paleonutritionist Mark Nathan Cohen from New York University suggests that these primitive pharmacologists operated under a system of trial and error that cost countless lives over millennia, but created humanity's first medical database. Each death from accidental poisoning was a lesson learned and passed on to the entire tribe. The terrible price of history's first secret recipe. Statistical analyses of archaeological sites show that communities with greater botanical knowledge had significantly higher survival rates during periods of scarcity, suggesting that the mastery of these dangerous recipes was a crucial evolutionary advantage. The most fascinating part: many of these primitive plant combinations are today recognized by modern pharmacology as precursors to essential medicines. Aspirin is derived from salicylic acid found in willow bark that our ancestors chewed 40,000 years ago. Morphine has its origin in poppies that were ritually cultivated by Neolithic communities. The knowledge that almost killed them over time saved millions of lives. Tamed fire, the technology that changed everything. Approximately 400,000 years ago, in a rocky cave in what is now Israel, something absolutely revolutionary happened, a moment that would forever change the destiny of the human species and establish the foundations of all future cuisine. At the archaeological site of KFC Cave, an international team of researchers led by Dr. Avi Gopher discovered undeniable evidence of humanity's first controlled restaurant. It wasn't just an occasional campfire to keep warm on cold nights. It was a permanent installation where successive generations of early humans cooked their meals in the same place for thousands of consecutive years. The layers of fossilized ash reach more than 6.5 feet, 2 meters deep, evidence of culinary knowledge passed down through hundreds of generations. If today KFC revolutionized fast food with pressure fryers that cook chicken at exactly 315 degrees, 157 degrees Celsius, for a precise 15 minutes, our ancestors were mastering something surprisingly similar almost 500,000 years ago. They developed the first controlled cooking system in history, tamed fire that could be modulated, directed, and maintained for consecutive days. The most impressive discovery at KFC Cave: bones of giant birds, including extinct species of ostriches and emus weighing over 330 pounds, 150 kilo, with specific temperature marks that reveal sophisticated technical mastery. Using electron microscopy and thermal analysis, researchers identified at least 5 distinct cooking techniques: direct roasting, bones with marks of direct exposure to flames of 800–900 degrees, 1472–1652 degrees, indicating that smaller pieces were roasted quickly over live coals to seal in juices and create the Maillard reaction, the same chemical process that gives modern roasted chickens their flavor. Ash cooking, evidence of cooking at constant temperatures of 200–250 degrees Celsius, 392–482 degrees Celsius, suggesting that larger pieces were buried in hot ashes for slow, even cooking, a technique that distributed heat similarly to modern ovens. Controlled smoking. Chemical residues indicate prolonged exposure to smoke from specific woods, likely for preserving meat during long journeys or periods of scarcity. Pollen analyses show that they selected aromatic woods like cedar and juniper, the same essences that give a distinctive flavor to today's smoked meats. Primitive steaming, perhaps the most surprising discovery, evidence of cooking using water vapor in leather containers suspended over campfires. This technique, which preserves nutrients and creates soft textures, predates Asian steaming techniques by hundreds of thousands of years. Primitive frying. Chemical marks suggest that some foods were cooked in heated animal fat, a precursor technique to the frying that KFC perfected centuries later. Dr. Ruth Shahak Gross, a microarchaeology specialist, discovered something even more impressive. The first humans of KFC Cave were not just cooking out of necessity, they were creating deliberate sensory experiences. Analyses of phytoliths, plant microfossils, show that they added specific aromatic herbs during different phases of cooking, creating complex flavor profiles. Homo erectus was not just eating to survive, they were developing sophisticated palates, culinary preferences, and techniques that would be passed down through hundreds of generations. Research from Harvard University, led by Dr. Richard Wrangham, shows that the act of cooking not only released 30% more nutrients from proteins, but also provided the crucial energy for the accelerated growth of the human brain. Each cooked meal was literally an evolutionary step towards modern consciousness. Controlled fire was not just the first culinary technology, it was the technology that made us human. Just as KFC revolutionized fast food with pressure fryers and standardized systems, our ancestors revolutionized humanity itself with the mastery of controlled fire. From Kesem Cave, culinary technology spread across entire continents. Archaeological sites in Europe, Schöningen, Germany, Africa, Wonderwerk Cave, South Africa, and Asia, Zhoukoudian, China, show similar evidence of controlled campfires dating to comparable periods, suggesting that culinary knowledge was one of humanity's first global technologies. The feast, when eating became a ceremony. But Paleolithic KFC completely transcended simple nutrition or survival. In the world's most mysterious archaeological complex, Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, 12,000-year-old megalithic pillars reveal elaborate reliefs that tell an extraordinary story. Giant birds consumed in communal rituals that lasted for days and brought together hundreds of people from different tribes. Dr. Klaus Schmidt, the German archaeologist who excavated Göbekli Tepe for 2 decades before his death, discovered something that challenges our understanding of the simplicity of Paleolithic societies. The pillars were not just monuments, they were stone menus that documented ceremonial feasts involving the ritualized consumption of extinct megafauna. Analyses of the bones found in specific circular enclosures show remains of Struthio demanicensis, giant Caucasian ostrich, Pelagornis sandersi, a marine bird with a wingspan of 23 feet × 7 meters, and other species that required the coordination of dozens of hunters to be brought down. It was not just food. It was a sacred communion that united entire communities through transcendental culinary experiences. If today people line up at KFC for convenience, pleasure, and the comforting familiar taste, our ancestors created social events that were even more elaborate and meaningful. Ethnographic evidence from modern hunter-gatherer peoples, such as the Kung of the Kalahari and the Hadza of Tanzania, suggests that the sacrifice of a giant bird would trigger festivals that lasted between 5 and 10 consecutive days. The meat was not simply divided at random. It followed complex social hierarchies that functioned as true primitive diplomatic protocols. Hunters who made the kill received specific parts, generally the heart and liver, organs rich in iron and vitamins. The elders, who possessed shamanic knowledge, received the most nutritionally valuable viscera. Nursing women received cuts rich in fat for milk production, and children received the most tender and easily digestible pieces. Dr. Brian Hayden, from Simon Fraser University, documented through ethnographic studies how these prestige feasts were fundamental not only for nutrition, but for the entire social structure of Paleolithic communities. The person who could regularly organize and provide giant bird meat gained political status, formed intertribal alliances, secured the best reproductive partners, and established leadership lineages that lasted for generations. But here's the most fascinating aspect. Isotopic analyses of human bones found near the feast sites show that these communities had access to a much greater variety of proteins than groups that did not participate in these gastronomic rituals. The feasts were not just celebrations, they were resource distribution systems that guaranteed better survival for all participants. Dr. Joanna Casey from the University of South Carolina discovered evidence that some of these feasts attracted people from distances greater than 125 miles, 200 kilometers, journeys that lasted weeks through dangerous territories. This means that the culinary reputation of certain communities extended through trade and social networks that covered entire continents. Excavations at sites like Dolní Věstonice in the Czech Republic reveal specialized areas for banquet preparation, kitchens with multiple campfires, areas for storing herbs, specialized tools for different types of cutting, and even primitive refrigerators, pits dug into the permafrost for preserving meat for weeks. The logistical complexity rivaled that of modern restaurants. Coordination of multiple teams, advanced planning of ingredients, synchronization of different cooking techniques, and the ceremonial presentation of the final dishes. Paleolithic KFC was not a simple operation. It was a culinary orchestra that required mastery of dozens of different specialties. Extinction and legacy. The end of the giant menu. Around 12,000 years ago, during the end of the Pleistocene, something dramatically tragic happened that would forever change the culinary fate of humanity. The magnificent megafauna of giant birds, creatures that had dominated entire ecosystems for millions of years, began to disappear from the planet at an alarming rate. Was it devastating climate change, excessive hunting by exponentially growing human populations, competition for resources with expanding mammals, or a deadly combination of all these factors? The scientific debate remains fierce, but one thing is absolutely certain. The Paleolithic giant menu came to an abrupt and irreversible end. Just as modern KFC had to adapt when traditional ingredients became scarce or economically unviable, substituting lard with vegetable oils, developing antibiotic-free chicken, creating vegan options, our ancestors faced humanity's first great gastronomic crisis. But the consequences were far more dramatic than simple menu changes. Dr. Gifford Miller from the University of Colorado used carbon-14 dating on fossilized eggshells to map exactly when these extinctions occurred. In Australia, the Genyornis newtoni disappeared exactly 47,000 years ago, coinciding precisely with the arrival of the first humans on the continent. In North America, giant birds like the Titanis disappeared 15,000 years ago, just after human expansion across the Beringia land bridge. Archaeological sites like Lake Mungo in Australia, a place that has preserved 50,000 years of continuous human occupation, show the tragic and fascinating transition recorded in precise stratigraphic layers. The lower layers are filled with massive bones of 440+ pound, 200+ kg birds. The upper layers contain only the remains of small birds, which shows how our ancestors had to completely adapt their culinary techniques, hunting strategies, and social structures to deal with smaller, more agile prey. Dr. Tim Flannery, an Australian paleontologist, documented how this transition forced an unprecedented technological revolution. Hunters who for millennia had used heavy spears and large traps had to develop elaborate nets made of braided plant fibers to catch small, fast birds, precision traps that worked with trigger systems for prey weighing just a few pounds, bows and arrows, a technology that was only developed after the disappearance of the giant birds, advanced preservation techniques to compensate for the smaller volume of meat per hunt. But the social consequences were even more profound. Feasts that fed hundreds of people for days became impossible. Power structures based on the supply of large quantities of protein collapsed. Spiritual rituals centered on the killing of giant creatures lost their meaning. Entire communities had to reimagine their cultural identities. Anthropological analyses suggest that it was during this period of forced adaptation that the first rudimentary agricultural techniques emerged. When hunting large animals became unviable, human groups began to experiment with the cultivation of nutritious plants, the Neolithic revolution that would, in time, lead to modern civilization. Dr. Jared Diamond, author of Guns, Germs and Steel, argues that this forced culinary crisis was paradoxically one of the most important events in human history. The need to develop alternative subsistence strategies accelerated technological innovation, promoted intertribal cooperation, and eventually led to the development of agriculture, animal domestication, and urban civilization. But the culinary legacy remained intact. The technique of combining proteins with aromatic herbs, the absolute mastery of fire to enhance flavors and textures, the fundamental social importance of sharing food, the community rituals centered on the meal, all these essential elements migrated directly from the Paleolithic to our modern kitchens. Today's KFC, with its 25,000 branches spread across 145 countries, is just the industrialized and globalized version of those first Paleolithic restaurants that brought tribes together around the fire. The secret recipe of 11 herbs and spices is a direct descendant of the risky botanical combinations that our ancestors tried 40,000 years ago. The social ritual of gathering to share seasoned chicken is the same fundamental human need that led hunters to risk their lives against giant birds. The extinction of the giant birds did not end human cuisine. It forced its evolution. It transformed necessity into art, survival into culture, and hunger into hospitality. The price was the loss of magnificent creatures we will never see again. The legacy was the foundation of all global gastronomy. Back to the culinary future. When you bite into a piece of seasoned chicken today, whether at a local shop, a sophisticated restaurant, or with KFC's famous combination of 11 herbs and spices, you are participating in a ritual that completely transcends the simple act of eating. You are experiencing a 40,000-year-old recipe, a culinary tradition that survived ice ages, mass extinctions, agricultural revolutions, world wars, and unimaginable technological transformations. The Paleolithic KFC did not die when the last giant birds disappeared from the Australian plains or European forests. It evolved, adapted, and became sophisticated, but it kept its fundamental essence intact through millennia. The courage that was necessary to hunt 440-pound, 200 kilos birds, armed only with wooden spears, was transformed into the culinary audacity that today creates new flavors, experiments with exotic ingredients, and challenges palates around the world. The toxic herbs that our ancestors risked their lives to try, substances that could both cure and kill in a matter of hours, became the sophisticated seasonings that define entire cuisines. The primitive pharmacy transformed into molecular gastronomy. Culinary shamanism evolved into the science of food, but the fundamental quest remains the same: to transform simple ingredients into transcendental experiences through the combination of knowledge, technique, and courage. Dr. Claude Lévi-Strauss, the great French anthropologist, argued that cooking is the activity that most clearly distinguishes humans from animals. But our journey through time reveals something even deeper. Cooking not only distinguishes us, it defines us, connects us, and transforms us. Every meal is a link in the unbroken chain that unites us with our most remote ancestors. The next time you smell that familiar aroma of roasted chicken wafting through the air, pause for a moment and truly perceive its complexity. It's not just industrially processed food. It is the accumulated result of thousands of generations of brave experimentation, constant innovation, and extreme sacrifice. Every bite carries the genetic memory of hunters who risked everything for a transcendental meal, of shamans who tried deadly plants to discover miraculous cures, of entire communities that gathered around the fire to share not just sustenance, but identity, culture, and hope. If Colonel Sanders created a secret recipe that conquered the modern world, our Paleolithic ancestors created something infinitely more revolutionary and enduring. The very idea that eating can be simultaneously sensory pleasure, natural medicine, spiritual ritual, sophisticated technology, and artistic expression. They didn't just invent fast food, they invented the very notion that food can be culture. The knowledge that almost killed them, the risky experimentation with poisonous plants, the hunting of creatures that could easily kill them, the mastery of a fire that could burn down their entire communities, eventually saved and enriched billions of human lives. Every modern restaurant, every famous chef, every family recipe passed down through generations, every moment of culinary pleasure we experience today exists because some brave ancestors decided that surviving was not enough. They wanted to live with flavor, art, and meaning. Perhaps the true secret recipe is not the famous 11 herbs and spices kept in a safe in Louisville, Kentucky. Perhaps it is something much older and more precious: the 40,000 years of culinary evolution, brave experimentation, constant innovation, and love for transforming simple ingredients into extraordinary experiences that brought us to this moment. Our ancestors were not brutish cavemen fighting only for basic survival. They were humanity's first chefs, pioneering gastronomic visionaries, empirical scientists, artists of flavor, and architects of human culture. They literally molded our physical, mental, and spiritual evolution through the mastery of fire, risky botanical experimentation, and the fundamental belief that a meal prepared with knowledge, technique, and love can transform the experience of being alive. If this epic journey through time has made you completely rethink what it truly means to be human, and especially what it means to eat as a human, like this video and subscribe to the channel for more fascinating explorations into the mysteries of our origins. After all, we are all proud descendants of those brave primitive cooks who transformed the struggle for survival into culinary art, biological necessity into sophisticated culture, and hunger into one of the richest and most meaningful experiences of human existence.